Welcome to the Darkstream. I'm Voxday, voxday.blogspot.com, and Infogalactic News. Thanks for swinging by. I've been working on my next book. Not, as you would probably assume, SJW's always doubled down, although I've been working on that too. But although that's my next really new book, next entirely new book, the next book that I am actually going to be releasing is going to be volume 2 of my collected columns, which is going to be entitled Crisis and Conceit, 2006 to 2009. They'll probably go on to Audible eventually. And it's been kind of interesting. The production editor pointed out to me that although we had a foreword written by someone else, we didn't have an introduction for it yet, even though they're doing the layout right now. And so it's been kind of interesting to look at it and try to put things into perspective, because you see how differently things have changed. When I started working on, started thinking about doing the introduction for it, I was thinking about that time period, the most significant things from that time period, which of course was the financial crisis of 2008. I wrote a lot of columns about that. It was something that I blogged about a lot. It was something I thought about a lot. Unfortunately, I didn't understand how to make money off it, or maybe I would have been a big short winner too. But what was interesting was to also look at some of the stuff that was going on that was sort of less historically significant. Like, for example, I've forgotten that that was a somewhat difficult time, both personally and professionally. Personally, it was difficult because that was when my father was arrested, when he went on the run, ended up, getting sentenced to 15 years and 2 months in federal prison. I'd forgotten how stressful that was at the time. And then also, thinking about how it was a difficult time professionally. You got to remember that this was before, even though 2006 wasn't that long ago, this was really before Amazon was known to be a significantly viable option. It was before you could really publish on your own as anything but a vanity publisher. It's kind of funny that I'm wearing this Castelia House shirt. Just tonight I was just sending off a contract to a author whose name you will recognize when we announce that we're doing one of their books. It's kind of bizarre to go from having been persona non grata in the science fiction community to suddenly being someone who is sought after by science fiction authors and political authors and serious intellectual figures, people like Martin Van Creveld, people like Bill Lind. It sometimes feels a little bit crazy, especially when you're looking at what happened. I wrote one column. I had a single throwaway line relating to hard science fiction and female authors. And because of that, my career in mainstream science fiction was finished. One single statement, one single written statement in a column, and suddenly, it's brought to the attention of the entire science fiction world by an editor at the largest science fiction house. No, this was years before that line. This was, here's how distant in time it was. It was an article I wrote about Susan Estrich's comments, very nasty comments, about Michael Kinsley. Kinsley's dead. Estrich is forgotten. You know, I mean, people forget that these were, you know, at the time, these were fairly significant figures. Kinsley was publishing, he was the lead publisher at Slate, and Estrich had run Dukakis's campaign, and she was always on, you know, cable news. You know, these were the kind of people that were, you know, the sort of the talking heads, the equivalents of the Erik Eriksons or the, you know, the Young Turks folks, or what. I mean, these were people that everybody who followed that kind of stuff knew at the time. I mean, why on earth? I mean, now in retrospect, it seems totally ridiculous to have written a column about them. Who cares? You know, it's totally irrelevant. And yet that was enough. A throwaway line in a column about an irrelevant subject, about forgotten people, was enough to sink my science fiction career in mainstream publishing. Now, of course, you know, in retrospect, looking back, I just said something about women don't write hard science fiction because they don't get degrees in physics and so forth. They get them in, you know, literature and Chaucer or something like that. You know, just, it's true. It's absolutely true. Now, yeah, exactly. I like that comment. It says first SJW attack. That's exactly what it was. You know, SJWs always lie. SJWs always double down. These books, these very successful #1 political philosophy books, might never have existed if it weren't for that rather nasty, rather vicious little attack from Patrick Nielsen Hayden. You know, and what's interesting about it, about most, when you go, if you want to look it up, you can read it. Look up, if you do a search on Google, look for New Heights of Prestige for the Nebula Award. And it's amazing how everybody just piles on. I mean, I was making the list. It says, science fiction writers eager to curry favor with the influential editor at Tor Books dutifully piled on, including John Scalzi. Interestingly enough, this is before Scalzi got published. Scott Lynch, Jonathan Voss Post, Charles Stross, Laura Mixon, Stephen Gould, and Elizabeth Bear, just to name a few. So all of this was a precursor to what we saw both with the SFWA thing in 2013 and also the stuff that we continue to see now. I mean, Origins of a Dark Lord is right. And so, you know, I'm glad that it happened now. You know, we would not have Castalia House. We would not be doing, we probably would not have Infogalactic. You know, we might not have the Evil Legion of Evil. We certainly wouldn't have Rabid Puppies. And we wouldn't have all these great things. That's funny. But we wouldn't have all these great things. And so, are your political books more popular than the epic fantasy? Oh yes, absolutely. I probably sell, let me see, I sell 5 times more political books than I do fiction. You know, some have said, why do you waste your time writing fiction? You know, they tend to forget that I was a fiction writer for, you know, a long time. I was first published as a novelist in 1996, and I didn't publish my first nonfiction until 2008. So, but it's true. You know, the Nietzschean aphorism is true, that which does not kill you makes you stronger. You know, when I say that it killed my career in science fiction, notice that I said in mainstream science fiction. But it made my career as an independent writer, as an independent publisher. You know, one thing I noticed was that, because I have to, you know, I don't remember some of this stuff, I have to look it up. I was thinking, you know, was this the period that I first created Selenaut? And sure enough, Summa Helvetica was published in 2008. It's a pretty good year for publishing for me. I published Summa Helvetica and I published The Irrational Atheist in the same year, 2008. And then in 2009, I published Return of the Great Depression. So that was a pretty good little 2-year run for writing. And, you know, probably some of it was motivated by that realization that, you know, okay, I'm on my own here. You know, I don't have to please anybody. I have to find an audience. You know, I can't count on Tor Books or Pocket Books or Simon & Schuster or anybody like that. I can't count on them just giving me a market like they did, you know. But Jackie Chan. How do I remind you of Jackie Chan? You know, I mean, yes, I can kill you with this chair, but other than that, how? It's a joke. Maybe. Anyhow, I think that it's a really useful reminder. I mean, one thing I like about this stuff, because, you know, I don't go back and read my old columns. You know, I don't go back and pay attention to this stuff. But it really is interesting because it's a history. What it turns out is it's a history. These collected columns are a snapshot of what that time was like. And some of it is significant. You know, some of it you can see the seeds of the future. And then some of it you're wondering, why were we wasting any time at all thinking about this stuff? You know, what on earth possessed me to write a column about this crap? You know, I don't care about it now. Did I really care about it then? So anyhow, it's but yeah. So pretty soon, I'm not sure exactly how soon. Collected Columns Volume 2, Crisis and Conceit, 2006 to 2009, will be coming out. And if you're interested, there it'll be. You already know what the picture on the cover is going to look like because it's the one we use for the Supreme Dark Lord t-shirts. So, and I have to go and, before we do Volume 3, I'll go get a current picture taken for that. So, need to hit the gym a bit more here or something. Anyhow, also, I should mention, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, for those of you who like science fiction, David Van Dyke and B.V. Taylor have released Battleship Indomitable, which is the second book in the Galactic Liberation series. It's even better than the first one. So, you know, keep in mind, Castelli House only publishes the print versions. So, not that we don't encourage you to get the Kindle, especially if you want to if you want to spend less. But we have published that. Let me, I think we actually have, yeah, here's the first one. So, this is book 1, Starship Liberator. We just published Battleship Indomitable, so I don't have it yet. It's about the same length. This one is, yeah, this one's 474 pages. That one's 456, but David Van Dyke, B.B. Larson, good books. Castelli House. You know, check it out if you're into space opera. It's big space opera and it's good stuff. Anyhow, but to get back to the larger subject, you know, one thing I hope that this encourages you is to remember that even when things look kind of bad at the time, that doesn't mean that it's not going to turn out to be a good thing in the end. I mean, if you were to look back at that and go, good Lord, this guy just basically had his, I mean, Charles Stross even said at the time, you just pissed off 75% of the community. I think you made a career-limiting move. And he was correct. I had. Absolutely. And yet, look what came out of it. Would I trade all of this stuff, for a generic 3-book contract at a mainstream publishing house, owned by other people? I mean, you look at somebody like, I mean, even somebody who's got a great, contract like John Scalzi. He is, a slave to the beast. Yeah, you're well paid, maybe, if you're lucky, if you're really lucky. But most of them aren't. Most of them, they get 10,000, maybe 20,000 if they're really well established and they sell well. The mainstream contracts now, the initial ones, have fallen as low as $2,500. It's not a good deal. And so I think that I get asked to do interviews literally every day. I can't do it. It takes too much time, and something like this where we're just talking. This is good. Nobody's setting up any verbal minefields. Some of you have questions. I can answer the questions. That's all good. And I can do it at my leisure. I mean, it's, 2-something in the morning my time. I don't have to schedule it. I don't have to worry about anybody's schedule. We don't have to worry about, okay, yeah, the sound sucks, or whatever. But there's no editing. There's no, it's just straight communication. I don't sleep as much as I should. But I mean, I do Stefan's show once a month. I think that's probably enough for the most part. There's a couple I did just get a couple interview requests that I did get a couple interview requests that specifically wanted to discuss one of my books. I'll probably do those just because I think that's the responsible thing to do. But in general, I mean, what's kind of funny, well, Stefan's going to be publishing one with us. I need to get editing it. It's great. It's really good. And so Trump is not in any particular danger. No, I don't think so. It's pretty insane to try to threaten the guy who has nukes and drones and the constitutionally, or the judge-approved right to use them however he wants against whomever he wants. I don't think that anyone is doing that. I'm not still reading Ebola. I started reading it. I didn't like it. No, his presidency's not over. And I decided that if I'm going to read it, I'm going to read it in Italian. The translation that I was reading struck me as kind of clunky, and so I'd rather just read it in Italian. I don't know actually which book it was. It was a collection of, I think it was a collection of essays. But in general, my Italian's not fluent, but I'm very conversational, and I read Umberto Eco and I read Italo Calvino in Italian, so I don't have too much trouble. Nonfiction is even easier. Eco is difficult just because he's prone to making up words, and it's very confusing when you go and you talk to all your Italian friends and you look it up in the dictionary and the word just does not exist. I don't think that the media assault on... Now let's go ahead and talk about Trump, since everyone wants to talk about Trump. I don't think the mass media assault on him is going to change anyone's opinion about Watergate. Watergate was over a long time ago. No, I don't speak Latin and I don't read Latin. Unfortunately, I wish I did, but I've never taken the time to study it. I picked up a couple little books like the Winnie the Pooh translated into Latin and stuff with the idea of doing that, but instead I've been learning Italian and French. So, just honestly, they have a lot more application in my world. Living in Italian culture and then doing some work with a French company just makes more sense to study the living Romance languages. Why the constant Russia accusations? Because they're desperate. They're absolutely desperate to try to stop him. I think that the moderates thought that it was going to be a lot easier to control him. But a lot of people don't realize how much they don't realize how much Trump has managed to do, despite all of the chaos and crises and all this stuff going on. It's kind of remarkable that it's almost advantageous in some ways to the administration because if you look at NAFTA's getting renegotiated. All the stuff going on with the relationship with China has been significantly altered, I think, for the better. And okay, this guy's got to go. He's just being distracting. It's not that hard, you guys. If you've got a question for me, fine. But this is not a place to have discussions with other commenters. Okay. Go jump on Facebook or Twitter or something if you want to do that. There's a great comment about Lieberman as FBI director. They said Secretary of State Romney and Chief of Staff, who's the fat guy from New Jersey, Christie, and Chief of Staff Chris Christie will welcome Joe Lieberman, FBI director. It's just one of those names that people who are that they're putting out there. I think, I think it would be a remarkably bad decision by Trump to put Lieberman in there. If he did, I think that would be a strong indication that he is listening to the moderates and cucks again. I think it'd be very foolish. One thing that you always got to keep in mind about Trump is that Trump always wants to be reasonable. He wants to reach out to both sides and have everybody, he wants to make a deal. And he is gradually learning that you cannot make deals with implacable enemies. And so the question is he going to cave, or are the gloves going to come off? Kushner is interesting because everybody assumes that he is, just some sort of Jewish neocon, something. But what's interesting is when you look at people talking, people on the inside talking about Kushner, it sounds to me like Kushner is actually one of Bannon's better allies. So I don't know what's going on there. I don't understand the dynamic there. But I would be very hesitant to count him out or to conclude that he is necessarily part of the problem. That may not be the case. You always have to, yes, it is always wise to be wary of people. Yeah, but your opinion is irrelevant. You don't know. You're making that opinion on somebody just because he happens to be Jewish. Okay? That is foolish. Because there are millions of Jews, some of them are tied to, there are plenty of good people who are tied in some way to bad people. You didn't mention it, but we all know perfectly well what you're talking about, so just relax. The point is, and there's nothing wrong with being wary of somebody's allegiances when they happen to have those connections, okay? But there's a difference between being wary of somebody and making an assumption about who and what they are and what they represent. I'm not saying that Kushner is a good guy. And certainly, Ivanka seems to be a bit of a problem in that, she's tender-hearted and is liable to, want to make decisions based on the fact that she felt bad about something. All I'm saying is that when you actually look at what's going on and who's arguing for what and that sort of thing, Kushner may not be on the side that you think he is. And so, no, I didn't hear. Why did Mike say that the Trump movement is over? You got to keep in mind, Mike's a sharp guy, and he's quite good when it comes to reporting stuff, but he's also prone to drama when it comes to. I mean, that's part of why he's so popular. He always looks at things in the most exciting and dramatic way. He does know what he's doing, but that doesn't mean that he's always right. If you recall, after the Syrian bombing, things tended to play out considerably more the way that I said. I was one of the very first people to say the Syrian bombing was related to North Korea, and that it did not indicate that we were suddenly going to be invading the Middle East. And so, oh, I see, okay. Yeah, anyhow, we'll see what's up. I mean, again, I think that in all these things, I always counsel patience. Everybody is always trying to read the tea leaves. Everyone is always trying to interpret X because of Y and declare that therefore means Z. Well, guess what? It almost never does. So, people and events are very, very difficult to predict. And most of the predictions that you make will be wrong. Like I said, looking back at these old columns and that sort of thing, there are certain things that you can see are the seeds of the future. But it's very, very hard to see which of those things are the significant seeds and which are irrelevant. If I had known, then I would have spent more time writing about the stuff that turned out to matter and less time writing about the stuff that proved to be irrelevant. But I didn't know. Nobody knows. And just to be clear, I am not in any way, shape, or form criticizing Mike here. There's a reason why there's probably 500 of you tuned in for this, and there are probably 10,000 tuned into Mike. It's more interesting. It's more fun. There's nothing wrong with that. So, I mean, Mike's one of my most important social media allies. He's a Castalia House author. I support him completely, 100%. Doesn't mean I'm not always going to, doesn't mean I'm not going to crack up at times when he's, All right, this guy is going to go because he's just trying to get attention. So, no, but it's not fair to say that my periscopes are more interesting or his periscopes are more interesting because everybody's interests are different, Although I was joking with Space Bunny that I was going to, try to build up my following and really attract more attention by doing a periscope holding one of our dogs, you know, the way that he does. Of course, the problem with that plan was that because we have these, you know, 95-pound Ridgebacks, they're going to have to be very short periscopes because I can't possibly hold a 95-pound Ridgeback that long. What will happen with the Seth Ridge case? I think that they're going to be investigating it, and I think that it's going to prove to be related somehow to the DNC. Yes, Rhodesian Ridgebacks. A puppy Rhodesian Ridgeback does you no good whatsoever. It's like small for about 6 hours. So, anyhow, yeah, maybe one of these times, I'll bring one of the dogs on it. Anyhow, so that's all I have for tonight. Check out Battleship Indomitable from Castelia House when you get a chance. Collected Columns Volume 2 is coming out soon. And don't overreact to the media. Don't overreact to the media. Battleship Indomitable. David Van Dyke and B.B. Larson. So don't overreact to the media. Be patient, and have some confidence in the God Emperor. People have been counting him out again and again, and people have been wrong again and again. Not the first time, won't be the last time. Have a good evening.